Hey everybody, I'm your host Cal, and today I'm going to show you guys how I made my life-size Gonk Droid. So to start it off, I got a couple of containers off of Amazon, 64-quart containers to be exact. I also used some black plastic tubing, wooden dowel rods, a drill, and multiple bit sizes, some sandpaper, a respirator mask, scissors, duct tape, contact cement, or E6000 later on in my build, preferably not the one that looks like this, cardboard pieces, random scraps, EVA foam, corrugated plastic tubing, vinyl tubing, a couple of Jello cups, an X-Acto knife. You really want to be careful with this one. I actually almost cut my thumb off not too long ago, and it was not a fun experience. First I cut out some EVA foam pieces and kind of matched them up with the top container. See, the containers have these weird divots that just sit there, which are great looking aesthetically, but for the front of a droid I wanted something a little bit more solid, at least in between the two. I used a heat gun to curve the EVA foam so it would fit over the top, then glued it and taped it into place. Then I weighed it down. I also cut a piece for the bottom. Now the face of the Gonk Droid was made from random bits. Lots and lots of Legos, little Dr. Pepper cans, just random scraps that I find all over the place. That one holds the earpiece for a cell phone. Bottle caps. There's the EVA foam, LED lights, and other such things. A lot of Gonk Droids have this weird big E shape on one side, so I cut a piece out of EVA foam and slapped it onto there and glued it down with contact cement. After having eaten all the Jello out of the Jello cups, I glued the Jello cups to the side. This is a Patchy container. I don't know if you've ever had Patchy, but it's amazing. Once the Patchy container was empty, I glued it onto the side of the Gonk Droid, cut a couple of holes in it, ran some tubing into it, and connected it to these two X-Shot containers, which honestly I don't know what they're for. I envision them as capacitor batteries or something like that. I ran some more tubing out from underneath that. Then, after having eaten a strip of Reese's, I used the box that comes with the Reese's package and glued it onto there. And voila, we've got some kind of weird surge protector on the side of the Gonk Droid. I don't know, future tech is strange, guys. It's not supposed to look normal. For the back, I decided to go with a spray paint can lid, which wasn't hard to find because I have so many lying around. I put some EVA foam on the end of it, and then I glued a cardboard dowel tube underneath it. I cut the dowel tube at an angle so that it actually sat upright and fit with the slope of the container. Then I took some random boxes that I'd found around the house, just bits of scrap, interior, and other things, and just glued them down, taped them into place to make sure that they wouldn't come open. Now for aesthetics, I decided to have tubes that would go into this build. Unfortunately, that means I have to poke holes in my Gonk Droid. So here I am with the drill doing just that. This looks like I'm just randomly poking holes, but I'm actually trying to be accurate here. To get the placing of the holes right, and to avoid cracking the container. You really don't want to crack the plastic. It's really hard to repair it afterward. Once the holes are drilled, I just thread the vinyl tubing through there. I did a couple pieces of this. I realized I could have just done one piece and looped it through the whole thing, but I tried that earlier and I wasn't satisfied with the results, so I went with this approach. Doesn't look too bad. It'll look better once the whole thing's painted. I got a couple of medicine containers, it was pretty easy to find those lying around the house, and taped them together, then glued them to the side. I found the top of a 3D printed mouse droid and stuck it on there as well, along with some bits of cardboard that I'd cut to look like futuristic metal plating. Here I'm creating a vent. It's basically just a big, flat piece of cardboard with a cut in the center. I put another smaller piece of cardboard behind it, then lined some other cardboard pieces that are around the same thickness behind that. In addition, I've got wooden dowels already set down in the space behind the rest of the cardboard. So I hold it down for a while and then I turn it over. Then I insert the wooden dowels. Now I'm gonna have to glue each and every one of these dowels. I get some more cardboard and pile it up on top. I know this is a weird way to do it, but it'll make more sense once it's done. The idea is to create a vent that protrudes out of the Gonk Droid's surface. Probably an exhaust port because I imagine these things run hot since they are basically mobile reactors. I glue all of the dowel rods into place, and I kind of rotate them around to make sure that the parts that I've actually glued into place are the ones that stay on. I don't want these things falling off, so I apply some contact cement. I usually do them around 1 or 2 at a time. This is messy. You're gonna get glue on your fingers if you try this. I know I did. Then I weight it down. A DeWalt drill casing with the bits included tends to be the right amount of weight, but sometimes it's not enough, so I added another container. Once the glue is all dry, the vent is ready to be added to the Gonk Droid. I duct tape it into place along the side. You don't see me doing it, but I'm actually sanding each and every part that I glue stuff onto to give the glue something to bite into. Lessens the chance of things falling off. And here I am removing the tape. If the camera looks shaky, that's because I'm doing the camera work myself for that shot. It's really hard to remove tape and do this with one hand. This was a random piece from a TIE Fighter box that I got not too long ago. I used that as some kind of front vent, with 2 wires protruding from it. I've also added some details on the left and right side of it to give it a little more visual interest. I use a cell phone box, courtesy of my last cell phone, as a power box. Run a couple of inches of corrugated plastic tubing through it, and then thread those into pre-drilled holes. I also used a small container lid, which I had drilled through earlier, to make it look like it was connecting to a port. That wasn't enough detail for me, so I cut some pieces out of EVA foam and structured them how I like them. The Gonk Droid at this point doesn't actually look too bad, but there is a problem. The midsection is completely exposed. It's just 2 plastic containers adjoining to each other. I've seen some people take styrene plastic and just wrap it around the thing. Sometimes they'll 3D print a shell that goes all the way around and covers this seam. I don't have access to either of those, so I use the next best thing. Big strips of EVA foam, which I cut to size and then glued together. I taped the strips together and then wrapped them around the Gonk Droid to make absolutely sure that they would fit the circumference. Then I untaped them, glued them together with contact cement, and retaped them to dry. Then I wrapped the strip around the entire Gonk Droid and contact cemented it into place. It's actually just glued to the top half of the droid. I didn't glue the top bin to the bottom bin because I wanted to be able to take this droid apart. I discovered later on that the EVA foam actually creates a sort of vacuum seal between the top and bottom halves, making it a little harder to take the droid apart. Even so, with a little bit of work, the top half and the bottom half will come apart, which makes it easier for storage and transport. Once all that was done, I took the droid outside and gave it a paint job. I made sure to tape over anything that I didn't want painted. I started out with this sort of mossy green color, but decided I didn't like it, so I went with more of an olive green later on. Now, Star Wars has a rule that wasn't broken until the prequels, and that rule is, everything is dirty. Literally everything is dirty, grimy. Even if stuff just rolled off the assembly line, it's gonna have some form of grease or paint or some kind of gunk on it. Here I am using black acrylic paint that's been heavily watered down, and using a paintbrush to just sprinkle it down all over the droid to make it look like there's been some kind of oil spill or acid rain that's just been slowly weathering down the outer coating and turning it black in the process. This droid has definitely been through some shit. The more grime, the better. I also painted some white stripes on the side, just to give it a little bit more visual interest. I used a 2x4, which I cut in half, to make the legs. And here is where I made my biggest mistake. Remember that black tubing I was going to use for the legs? Yeah, it doesn't fit around those 2x4s. So I had to get rid of that completely. Thankfully, I was able to find some white tubing later on that did fit around them, although I had to shave down the sides of the 2x4 considerably to make that work. For the Gonk Droid's feet, I ordered a couple of electrical boxes off of Amazon. These were a good shape and around the right size. This is where my brain kicked in. I took the 2x4s and put them on top of the electrical boxes. Then I used a Sharpie to trace the outline of the bottom of the 2x4 onto the top of each box. This lets me know where I need to cut them so that the 2x4s can fit into the boxes. Once that was done, I took my Dremel sander and its cutting bit, and I completely destroyed it by cutting into these boxes. My Dremel is in the corner, smoking and sputtering as we speak, and I'm pretty sure it almost caught fire, but at least I was able to make good-sized holes for the 2x4s to fit in. Now I'm going to use this diagram here to show you where I made my mistake, and what I would do different. The 2x4 runs the full length of the Gonk Droid. The only problem is, if I set it up like this, the top half will stay on top, and the bottom half will fall down onto the shoes because it's not supported. I tried to counter this by placing a series of wooden supports on the bottom, on the top, and on the sides of the wooden legs, both inside and outside of the bottom half of the container, which you'll see in these series of pictures. This was not the best idea in the world. As a result, I have this weird wood segment that protrudes from the bottom of my droid. And while I was air nailing and screwing everything together, I ended up cracking the bottom of the casing, which further destabilized the Gonk Droid. It's not aesthetically pleasing, and it's not ideal. If I were to do this all over again, here's what I would do. I'd take a piece of wood and cut it so that it either fits on top of or right inside the bottom of the container. I would then screw clamps into both this plank and the top half of the Gonk Droid, as well as the bottom half of the Gonk Droid. This would hopefully stabilize things a little bit more, wouldn't crack the casing nearly as much, and the bottom of my Gonk Droid wouldn't look like such a mess. But alas, here I am. Moving on. So once I've got the legs all together in their misshapen mess, I turned the droid upside down and slid on the white leg tubing. After that, I placed the electrical boxes into place. I marked out where the 2x4 meets the bottom half of each box, and then drilled 3 holes into the bottom section of each box. I then put a screw into each of those 3 holes, ensuring that the feet will never leave the legs. During this process, I figured out just how fragile this Gonk Droid was. A lot of the parts that I had painstakingly put together came right off. I glued them back on and taped them together. I did my best to patch the little guy up. Because he required so much patching up, I christened him Patchy. Then it was time for painting. I took Patchy outside and laid him on his side. Of course, I put some newspaper down first, because I really don't feel like painting my lawn. I removed the tape from the components that I had to reattach. Unfortunately, this ripped off some of the paint job in a few areas. I'll deal with that in a bit. The first thing I did was paint the legs and feet hammered silver. This is just to give the paint that would come later something to bite into. Afterwards, I went with the legs, feet, and some of the bottom of the droid with black spray paint. Unfortunately, the spray paint can I was using died. Thankfully, I had a spare. The spare was gloss black, instead of flat black like I wanted. I still used it to touch up the Gonk Droid, as well as add paint to different areas to make it look more like oil had leaked out on the droid. I reused the failing paint can to create this weird blotch texture. Then I tried rubbing it away in certain places to make it look like someone had tried to clean the droid up and then just gave up somewhere in the process. So I was looking to add a little bit more grime onto my Gonk Droid, and I found this spray paint can sitting in the back of a closet. I don't know what this kind of paint is for, but it ends up creating this really cool dirt sort of texture, almost like mud. So I applied it to most of my Gonk Droid, paying a special attention to the parts that would have solid contact with the ground. This blotchy, dirty, muddy texture really contrasts sharply with the oil stains and the industrial grime that I've used before, and I really do like it. It makes it look like it's been treading through mud puddles, like it's been walking over dirty terrain, floors that haven't been mopped, things like that. I did kind of rub the wet paint around to make it look like someone had tried to clean the droid in specific parts. Not so much the underside, but more of the top where it would be cosmetically pleasing to do so. It's worth noting that if you're going to put this sort of texture on your Gonk Droid, or any droid for that matter, it needs to fit the environment. If you're doing it just for display, that works fine. But if you're doing it for a fan film like me, it needs to suit the environment in which the fan film is being shot. For example, if your fan film is entirely indoors and your Gonk Droid is covered with mud and leaves, it's going to look out of place. Once all that was done, I sprayed the whole droid down with a clear coat to seal in the paint job, and it was finished.
And that's how I made Patchy here. He's not the most stable of droids. He won't do too well on grasslands, uneven terrain, places like that, but on tile floor like this, where it's nice and solid, or concrete, he works just fine. He stands on his own. Don't have to worry too much about balancing him. Unless there's an earthquake, I think he'll be just fine. Well, thank you guys for watching. I hope you found this tutorial informative, or at least entertaining. If you'd like more of this content, feel free to like, favorite, and subscribe. Do what you can to support the channel. And I'll see you guys in the next build video. Bye-bye!